knowing that I can do better. I know I can do better. I can do better. I can do better. And it's just one of those things that just somebody created a monster. And it was me, honestly, because, I mean, right now, I probably live, breathe strongman.
First of all, I want to thank North Lake Professional Group for having me on today. I am very honored to be here, actually very surprised that I was asked. So this is a very special opportunity for me to talk about my story and the motivation behind getting myself to the point that I am at right now. I think it's most appropriate if I start at the beginning of my life and the background that I come from. I was born and raised in Massachusetts on a dairy farm. Those two things don't tend to go hand in hand. You think Massachusetts and city, and I actually grew up on a dairy farm. And why does that seem very motivational or inspirational? Because if anybody is familiar with dairy farming, it's one of the hardest farming businesses around because of the fact that there's so much work involved. So from a very young age, I started peddling milk. That's terminology for delivering milk in glass bottles, door to door, shoveling poop, learning how to run a cash register at 11 years old, and pretty much everything start to finish process of being on a dairy farm. And I hated every minute of it. As a child, it was one of those things that was a lot of work for me and a lot of work for my siblings. But I believe that the work ethic and constantly being a part of a family business taught me a lot of things. I believe that it taught me that if you work hard enough and you continue to do something, even if you don't like it, it will get done and it will help you in the future. So I lived on a dairy farm for 20 years, and as I was growing up, I tried very hard to get away from the farm, and a lot of that ended up being me finding the wrong group of people to hang out with. And it slowly progressed into me not coming home and my parents fighting with me, and I picked up bad habits. I dabbled in drugs, and the relationship with my father suffered because of all of the things that had happened and had gone on. I guess the long story short part is that I ended up getting pregnant at 16 years old, and it was a very big eye-opener for me. It was an eye-opener for the relationship I had with my parents. It was an eye-opener for the relationship that I had with my friends, and it also really taught me who my friends were. I had to stop everything that I was doing. I couldn't hang out with people anymore. Not that I couldn't hang out with people anymore, but more along the lines of it wasn't appropriate for me to, because they were doing things that were not appropriate for somebody who was pregnant. Once my parents found out that I was pregnant, I was relieved. My mom cried, and my dad surprisingly told me that he would support me. So after 16 years of not getting along with my father, it was like a new way of communicating with my parents. Now that I'm 34 years old, looking back on, 16, I cannot believe how young I was doing it and how supportive my parents were of me continuing with the pregnancy and being a teen mom. And let me tell you, the easiest part was being pregnant. All of the hard stuff came after I had my son. 2 weeks after I had my son, I went back to high school. I know nowadays there's a lot of programs out there for people who are pregnant, who have children, to complete high school in a non-traditional fashion. But that was not an option for me when I was younger. It was 2 weeks, and then I went back to high school with, having a newborn baby. So I didn't get a lot of sleep. I didn't get to do the traditional things that I had done. And another thing that was really a big part of my life before I had my son was sports. I did pretty good in school, and I got pretty good grades. Another kind of curveball for me was that I was in something called a college prep school, but it was a Christian college prep school. So it was one of those types of schools that my father had gone to, my grandfather had gone to. So as the generations progressed, we all just went to school, and it was extremely difficult. But it prepared you. I mean, it wasn't, you could not pass a class, or you could get by with not doing your homework. They gave you a ton of homework, and they pushed you really hard to do accelerated type learning. In addition to those things, I was also very good at sports. In 7th and 8th grade, I went to state for cross country, and I played basketball all year round, and I also did track and field. And this was all in middle school. That didn't even I hadn't even gotten into varsity sports, and I was already on the varsity team because I was good enough. Friendship and pregnancy and drugs and all of those things have a way of leading you away from the things that matter. But having a child does a really good job of bringing you back into the things that do matter. And so you learn about people. I learned that the school that I had went to since kindergarten, how they treated me because I had a child. They didn't treat me badly in the essence of how you were treated when you were, back 30, 40 years ago, and you had to be sent somewhere. It was more along the lines of they made me go to counseling. I wasn't allowed to participate in extracurricular activities. They definitely treated the thing that had happened as a sin, and I had to repent for my sins, I guess is the word, every week. I had time set every week where I had to go to the school, talk to a pastor, and talk about having a child, which even when I was 16 years old, it was something that was very, I guess, normal. But because of the background that I had in the school I was in, it was still something that they treated a lot differently. Not in a disrespectful manner, but just more in a manner of, you need to go to counseling, you can't participate in extracurricular activities. And it's just one of those things that it was an added element of stress, something that went along with being a part of the Christian school that I went to. And it got to the point where I didn't feel like I needed to apologize for what I did. And I moved on. I actually ended up going to public school my senior year. All in all, I went to 3 different high schools, so I didn't make a whole lot of new friends in high school, but I did graduate, I did get good grades, and I did go to college. But obviously there's more to the story than just that, because in Massachusetts it's very, very expensive to live. So I was taking care of my son. My ex-husband was still in the picture because I did end up marrying him. And I was also working, and I was going to school. So I had a really, really full plate. And the place I was traveling to for college was 45 minutes away, like 45 minutes to an hour away. So that part of things was very hard to juggle and manage going forward. I have no idea how I got through all of it, but I think that my workload from being on a farm and the way that my parents raised me to think, I never once thought that everything was impossible, like I couldn't handle it, like I couldn't do it. Okay, maybe I thought I couldn't handle it, but I never stopped pushing forward. A big obstacle for me was my boyfriend was still into drugs. So I thought that if I took him away from the situation, that our relationship would get better. So with that being said, we could not afford a house. It was like $1,200 a month to rent an apartment in Massachusetts 20 years ago. So we moved with my parents to Indiana, and that's where I live now. So moving here was way more affordable, but just because you take somebody out of a situation doesn't mean that they change. And I ended up getting a divorce 4 years later, and also having another child. Now I have 2 kids. I'm living alone for the first time pretty much ever in my life. College has been pushed completely to the back burner, and I don't know what I'm going to do with. I think the hardest thing that I ever did was get a divorce because I had no idea what I was going to do from that point. It's like a crossroads. You know, I tried really hard not to be a divorced person because I was born and raised in a Christian school and in a Christian environment, and it's not something that was looked upon as traditional or acceptable. I started smoking cigarettes. I think at that point I had been smoking for 10 years, maybe a little bit less, and the idea of college and the idea of anything exercise related was not even a thought in my mind. It's like I had forgotten what it was like to do physical activity. Like, it's like it wasn't even something that was registering in my brain as something I was good at. So I had progressed in my career all on my own just because that's the type of person that I am. I worked at a bank, started as a teller, became a service manager, became a assistant manager, became a manager all on my own, but I was working 70 hours a week and trying to be with my kids and driving an hour one way to work. So at that point in my life, I was going through a divorce. I was working 70 hours a week. I lived an hour away from my job, and I had 2 very small children. again, I think that I didn't realize that my plate was a lot fuller than what it was and how hard it was to overcome some of the things. Now that my life is better because of the fact that I have a child, because he saved me from doing all of these horrible things, I had another aha moment in my life at 26 years old. I started exercising again. Well, you know what? People say, who cares? You started exercising. You think you're going to change your life. Well, I quit smoking at 26. It's now been 8 years since I quit smoking. And I started running, which I was pretty horrible at to begin with. I couldn't even make it around the track one time without being completely out of breath. And this track was 11 laps for 1 mile. And it took me a while to get back to the point where I could even run at all. I started doing it, and I never quit. I never gave up. Even though it was hard for me to do it, I just said, next time I'll do 2 laps. Next time I'll do 3. And then I got, 6 months later, I got second place in my weight class at a 5K. And the story continues. I actually got into an abusive relationship where it left me to the point where I didn't have a place to live for a little while, and I didn't have a job because I was in school. Yes, I tried the college thing once again, and I had to stop going to college so that I could go back to work, so that I could have a place to live, so that I could bring my kids back. It seems kind of irresponsible for somebody like that to, not have their kids, but I didn't have a place for them to stay. I was crashing on a friend's couch. Fast forward, I had a job, I had my own house again. I was living my life, had my kids, everything was great. And I decided I'm getting older and I need to start lifting weights. But I was so scared to even go into the weight room that I couldn't even do it myself. So I literally picked the one person that I knew lifted weights or knew what they were doing and asked them to help me. And I just started lifting with them and started lifting weights. And I was really horrible at it, and I was really weak. I started being dedicated towards it, and there was a local strongman competition in town that he actually ran, and he told me that if I didn't do it, it would look bad for him because he trained me and I wouldn't be participating. So I trained for it, and I worked pretty hard, and I competed the first time, and I literally never looked back. This whole eye-opening experience of strongman taught me that I was good at something. I remembered that I did cross country when I was younger. I remembered that I played basketball when I was younger. I remembered that I was good at those things. Like, there wasn't any sport that I did when I was younger that I wasn't good at. Weightlifting, different story, because I had never done it before. So it was something new, but because I had built that solid foundation of athleticism, I was able to work hard, which the farm taught me, be athletic, which sports taught me, and be mentally tough in my sport, which is what life has taught me. I learned that not taking no for an answer, internally setting goals for yourself, is what will get you through things. I learned that having a million things to do is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you have a lot of stuff to do that you need to get done. I worked so hard to build my mental grit to get through strongman that I think that it helped me in life too, because I remembered that I loved something, that I was good at something, instead of going to college for no reason, like you didn't have anything to figure out, going and doing things without reason. Sometimes you need a why. Why am I doing this? What's the reason behind it? and then you can focus getting there, how you're going to get there. So over the past 5 years, I have become world's strongest woman in my weight class. My boyfriend and I started a gym, and actually we just moved to a new location, completely our own facility. So now I can add business owner to my list of things that I have accomplished. Right now, I have so many things on my plate, but I couldn't be happier because of the fact that I have control of my own destiny, the things that I have learned from my past, and the mistakes that I have made have gotten me to this point of I have my own business, I'm world's strongest woman, everything's going the right direction, and I think that the biggest thing that I learned is you need to do what you love. And that sounds really easy to do, but it means finding something that you love and doing something work-related with it. So the only thing I feel like I have ever been good at is something sports-related. It totally makes sense that I'm opening a gym and I don't feel like it's work. It's the same thing that I tell my 17-year-old son because college is coming up soon. Find the thing that you love and then make it into a career. Same thing with being in the professional industry. If you find something that you're good at and you like it, that's what you need to pursue. Because if life has taught me anything with my story, as long as it is for only being 34 years old, it's to take the things that you're good at and forge on and push to make sure that they happen, and don't take no for an answer. As long as you work hard and you do what you love, you will be successful. So that in turn is the moral of my life and my story so far, is that as long as you work hard and you are committed to the things that you do, you will succeed. Thank you everyone for coming and listening to my story. I really hope that I can inspire you and motivate you to do the things that you love with your job, with your life, and with your career. Once again, thank you for listening to my story.